All right, gang. I know I promised you some Indian clubs, and I know some of you even bought some for this COVID-19 pandemic. So I'm glad to bring you the first in a series of Indian clubs videos, but I felt like we needed to build a good foundation. Because why? Because I'm a nerd, and that's what I like to do. I like everyone to understand things, and so here we're going to be. Now, what we're going to do in this video is we're going to build some vocabulary for learning new Indian clubs techniques, and we're going to go over some basic patterns. So I'm going to cut together a bunch of different patterns. So this class is going to be more like a skill building course, and then additional videos will come out after this, which are more about, getting a good workout in. Okay, so you can always come back and reference sections of this video if you need to work out a pattern. But we're going to start from the beginning. So some of these patterns you're going to know, some of these patterns you'll have never done before, and some of you have never done my Indian clubs workouts before, and everything's going to be new. And that's perfectly fine. Okay, so I'm going to start with one club in my hand. I'm just going to do everything with 1-pounders today. If you have a heavier weight, that's fine, but I'd like to start with 1-pounders if we can. Okay, so let's have some base terminology. This is an Indian club, but really the name for this is a meal, M-E-E-L, not M-E-A-L. A meal, it's the same word you use for a juggler's club, because guess what? This is the same thing. They started juggling these because these were extraordinarily common all throughout the United States and certain parts of Europe as exercise tools up until about the 1930s or 40s. These were becoming more and more common before really falling out of favor through the Great Depression and as community centers started to close, and then we started to have more industrialized technology for workout, and that really changed things. So anyway, this is a meal. It comes from ancient Persia. So sometimes you'll hear them called Iranian clubs as well. They called them Indian clubs because when the British got to India, that's where they saw them. So because they found them in India, clearly they should rename them Indian clubs. But this is a meal. So we're going to take a 1-pound meal, and we're going to talk about some of our starting positions. It's really helpful to have a common word for each starting position so that we can easily get there. Now, this is my system. This is my way of doing things. I've synthesized this from looking at a lot of modern people, reading some historical texts. There's a really great text by Sim Kehoe, which is available on Google Books. You can look at it for free. You can also order the print copy from Amazon, which is admittedly a lot easier to read because it's printed a little clearer than the scans. But you can look at this at home, and I'll link that below in the notes. Okay, so let's talk about our starting positions. Again, these are my words. These are not historical words. The first position we'll talk about is the front rack. The front rack, it's basically your palm is towards you. The club tip is towards the outside. If I had both clubs in my hands and I said bring both clubs to front rack, they would be inverted, right? Palms towards me, tips out. This is our front rack. Our back rack is just the inverted version of that. So if the front rack has the club in front of your face, in front of your head, the back rack has the club truly behind your head, not next to it. Because with a bigger club, a heavier club, if your habit of your back rack is being next to your head, you're going to smack yourself in the head and you're not going to have a good time. So a back rack is palm facing the same direction that your face is, straight on down, right? Club behind, tip in. Yes, you can bring both clubs to the back rack position at the same time. Front rack, back rack. Another term I like to use is forward rack. So the forward rack is this. You can see, we'll switch to the other camera, and you can see that basically it's a defensive stance, right? If you're a rapier person, it's a defensive hand position instead of an offensive. So not quite 90 degrees in your elbow, though it could be, somewhere like that, right? And you're holding it like you're holding an ice cream cone, or you're playing that game with the ice cream cone where you catch the ball in the cone, right? You want your forearm extended straight out, wrist straight, club tip pointing up. So front rack, back rack, forward rack. And the opposite of forward rack, I'm going to call it mace rack. The way mace rack looks is that it's basically parallel to your spine behind your head. It could be a one-handed or a two-handed mace rack. It could be that both clubs end up in the mace rack position next to one another. Okay? But those are kind of going to be our starting points. I'm going to start most of our positions from there. Now, you'll also have what I would call a low start, which is where your clubs are pointed straight down. And you'd also have a high start, which is when your clubs are pointed straight up in the air. Okay? So let's go through a couple of patterns. The first pattern that I always start with people are the inside circles and outside circles patterns. So let's start in your front rack. For an outside circle, you're going to start in front rack. You're going to dip the tip to pivot to back rack. When I mean dip the tip, I mean quite literally let the club do a little transition, right? Instead of just turning, which you can do if this is a little hard, if you're not ready to finesse it yet. But we like to dip the tip and it cuts out back to back rack. So it's dip the tip, cut out. And then once you're to here, you're going to rotate 180 degrees so that you're doing a false edge cut up to here. If you're not in my rapier class, or you're not in a plow class or a HEMA class at all, the true edge is generally the edge of a sword that is away from you, and the false edge is on the side that's close to you. So if you're training longsword or a German art, you're going to see that as the long edge and the short edge instead of true and false, but it's a pretty common sword concept. So I'm going to treat where these knuckles are, right? If I'm in my forward rack, this is the true edge on this side, and this is the false edge on the back side. Okay, so back to that in outside circle. Dip the tip, cut out, rotate, false edge. Dip the tip, cut with long edge, false edge. True edge, false edge. True edge, false edge. And you'll get a nice little flow here. What the rest of your body should be doing, you have just a very slight bend in your knees, right? And it depends on the pattern. This pattern can be served feet together without a bend, and this works really well. Now your core, you want to clench your core while you're doing this. So you want to tighten these inner muscles as well as your back muscles, have a nice stable core. And by bringing your feet together on this pattern, it will allow you to practice stabilizing your core and maintaining that balance. Now we can get both clubs in here. When we do that, they work in sync, right? So what you do with your left hand is the same thing. False edge across the face, true edge out. False edge to front rack, true edge out from back rack. Here we are. Now the other circle we like to do is an inside circle. So the inside circle, if we start in front rack, goes the other direction. It's a true edge cut where, again, you rotate in the same place, and false edge cut up to back rack. Dip the tip, cut. So it's the exact same thing we were just doing in reverse, completely in reverse. And you can add a second club, right? So we're going to start here. And you got to work on slightly different planes, right? These have to pass next to each other. Yeah. So this is an inside circle. The way we name them is that wherever the true edge cut is, right? True edge cut is inside for an inside circle, or a true edge cut is outside for an outside circle. Okay, the next one I want to talk about is the halo circle. So you're going to start these at another position, a starting position we didn't talk about, which is extension. Extension is where you're pointing both Indian clubs straight forward, or just one if we're doing a one-handed extension, right? So we're pointing straight forward. Now for this one, go ahead and take your feet to shoulder width apart. Add extension. And what you're going to do is you're going to keep the clubs parallel and swing them around your head like a halo. Now you're doing this from the wrists and elbows. The shoulders are stabilizing, your core is tight, you got a slight bend in the knees. Once you end up here at extension, your thumbs should be on top and your knuckles should be on the bottom. But as you go through, right, my knuckles are facing out, my knuckles are facing up, facing out, my knuckles are down, my thumbs are up, right? So my thumbs generally face me the whole time, right? My thumbs are on the inside the whole time and my knuckles are on the outside the whole time. That is what I'm calling the halo circle. Now we're gonna be one in extension, right? We'll start with our right club in extension, and our left club will be inverted. So it'll be basically reverse extension. I don't have a formal name for this, but it's gonna be the opposite of extension. And the front stroke is where you're maintaining this parallel nature, locking your core, right? So what you want to do is stabilize as much as possible from your core, being your abs and your low back, right, in your lumbar section. Now you're going to have your shoulders and top moving. So this is the front stroke. You're keeping them 180 degrees apart and stabilizing from the core, stabilizing, stabilizing, stabilizing. The backstroke goes in the other direction. Okay, when I do this, when I do front stroke, I do true edge cuts on the forward side. And when I do backstroke, I do false edge cuts on the front side. So this is thumb, there, look down here at my left hand, it's thumb up, cutting up for the backstroke. For the front stroke, I guess look at my right side, it's true edge cutting down, right? So that is the front stroke and the backstroke. The next one is a squat with an overhead swing. We colloquially at Plow like to call these ski squats because I didn't come up with any better name than that. So the starting position will be your low start, right? And from a nice little modest squat, okay? We're not going for like butt on the ground kind of squat, right? Because we're going to do this a bunch, but we're going to start down here. And as we extend up to our normal standing position, we bring our clubs to the overhead position. Low start, up start. Low start, up start. Low position, high position, right? So it is when we're in the low position, my thumbs are facing the camera. When we're at extension, my thumbs are facing back. And these are our ski squats. Try to time it so that you start and end the action at the same time. So I tend to catch my hang time at the top. You can also do this in slow motion, right? You can also do this as a very controlled, slow action where you hold that squat longer instead, right? Different style of muscle. That is the ski squat or the squat with overhead lifts. The next one is, well, the next pair actually are our rotations. So we have both a side rotation and a front rotation, which are pretty simple. You're going to extend your clubs straight out with the tips forward. Okay? Arms are straight out to your sides, tips of the clubs are forward. And this is going to depend on your range of motion. I'm going to start parallel to the ground, and we're going to rotate to parallel to the ground on the backside. Now, some people have a little bit more rotation, that's fine, but just be very cautious. You don't want to pull anything. You don't want to mess up your rotator cuff. So I would say, to be safe, start with parallel to the ground to parallel to the ground. Especially if you're on a heavier weight, right? If you're doing this with a 3/4 pound club, that's a great weight to start playing with flexibility, right? Still always being in control, not letting the weight control you. If you're using a 1 pound, you could probably get away with it, but be very careful. If you're doing a 2 pound or heavier, parallel to parallel only, please. Again, this could also be done feet together. It's a very different balance exercise when feet are together. Now, on the front, it's the same thing. Front rotation, parallel to the ground, parallel to the ground. Now you're going to have to shift the placement of your hand. You'll notice here that the clubs are pivoting on their center point, and I'm moving my hands to make this fit. Same rules apply. It can be done in either foot position. It's a nice thing to be able to mix up. That is the front rotation, and the other one was the side rotation. The next one we refer to as simply overhead circles. Now, this one might be kind of hard to see, but I'll go down on my knees and show this too, just so I don't have to move the camera. What we do is we start straight up, right? And we move the clubs in opposing directions. So my right club is moving clockwise, and my left club is moving counterclockwise. And I'm making circles that are they probably have a diameter of a few inches, right? It's a small circle in the air. I'll get down on my knees and do this one, see if it helps any. But the circles we're doing are about this big. And you'll notice that they're going in opposite directions. And then you want to alternate directions. So I switch which one's going clockwise and counterclockwise. But I do that straight up, right? Small motions. These ones are actually real killers. So these are overhead circles. And you'll see us just say switch direction, back and forth. The next pattern is pretty simple. It's basically a front circle or a front outward circle. And it looks like this. I don't hit my lamp there. So a front circle, you're basically working on the 45-degree planes of your body, right? So to compare that to sword terms, 45 degrees to the inside and 45 degrees to the inside, right? Basically like an inside quarta or an inside terza. You're doing that with both though, so you have to sync them up. And it's just this action. And it carries through on the same plane. Both clubs are moving in sync, and we can also change direction. This is one that works best with feet shoulder width apart, and really got to lock your core in. And reverse. And other way. Good. That is the front circle or front outward circles. This next one is called a chop squat. And I'm actually going to do what I said I wasn't going to do. And I'm going to use a heavier club for this. You could also put two lighter weight clubs together, or even just use a lighter weight club. Basically what you're going to do is start feet shoulder width apart. And you can either start in your squat with the blade low, or you can start standing up either in mace or top. I like to do this starting in mace. So we're in our mace rack, 2 hands, 1 club, mace rack, chop, up. And when you do the chop, again, my preference is to come to the forward rack. Mace rack to forward rack. Mace rack to forward rack. You could also cut for extension if you wanted. It depends on what you're going for. If you're a longsword student, you could get the squeeze in here, right? That magical Edelson cutting squeeze. And work on using your forearms on your torso to stop your cut. That's a very longsword thing to do. If you're looking to do this for general fitness, being able to stop yourself doesn't hurt. And when you do the action of stopping yourself here, you'll actually feel it affects your mid-back very differently. A lot of our students, especially in rapier, being very asymmetrical, they have issues with their mid-back. We use I's, Y's, and T's, specific exercises that they know, to help offset that. This is another one that can help. Don't go too fast, but this is a good way for you to help do that action. This is actually very similar to your eyes. So I like going mace to front, but if you want to do mace to cut, you can do that too. Depends on which practice you're into. So that is the chop squat. This next one is called the front rack swing, the front cast, the side cast. What this is you start in your front rack and you cut true edge out to what is comfortable and reverse. Cut and reverse. Cut and reverse. Cut and reverse. Can be done 2 clubbed. Cut and reverse. Cut and reverse. Cut and reverse. But again, get that out there, get that extension. Cut and reverse. Cut and reverse. So this, I like to call the side cast or the front rack cast. Casting is a term we generally mean for cutting, but where we cut with sending energy in a certain direction instead of just a cut. So this is a cast, and this is a cut. It's just the way I like to explain things. A drill that's very similar to the side cast is what we've been using for our tees exercises. So I would call this a leaning or a 45-degree side cast. So what we do is we start, let's get over to here. We start with our back in a 45-degree angle, nice and straight, stabilized, activating our core. And we're doing that basically a modified side cast where we're not starting in the front rack. We've sometimes called these eagle swings. It's just a modified version. You could try to come up to here, but I find that with the lane, it's a lot more difficult to do that. So I like to just swing and come across the breast. And I do this, I alternate which arm's on top when I do this one. This is also good for your upper and middle back. That is the eagle swings or the inclined side cast. This next one, we've always called ice cream cone because I think of it as just like that game with the ball and the string and the cone that you catch it in, right? So we start here in the forward rack. What you do is you take this up over your shoulder to similar to mace rack, right? It's not in the center, but just off center mace rack. And then you cut out to generally what's comfortable. You don't want to hyperextend your shoulder, so don't come swinging crazy far back, but cutting to just past the leg. And then you swing it back up and catch in that front rack. And I say it's catch because you want this action. And I teach this action because as you keep going, that action can become a transition instead. So what this becomes is this transition where when you switch which angle the club is pointing, you can just push it over your shoulder. And especially with a heavier club, it feels really cool. We can do this two-handed, right? So we start here, cut, and catch. And again, when you're first learning this one, I do a catch and go, cut and catch, go. And you'll eventually get to the point where you're comfortable just transitioning to sending the weight of the club up over your shoulder. Now, when I change weights on a club, I will do with the catch a few times just to get comfortable with the weight. But this will get a really cool, like, anti-gravity feel where the momentum lets the thing just glide right over your shoulder. So we call this ice cream cone. This actually comes straight out of Sim Kehoe's book, as do inside circles, outside circles, and a few others of these. So it's interesting to go and look at it. He just has it with an exercise number, which is why we gave it a fun name. This is the ice cream cone. The next one's a club lunge. And this one, it's easiest if you just start with one club back in mace rack to begin with, and one club down at your side, ready to push back. So you'll perform your first runner's lunge, pushing that downward club back, and then you'll switch. Take this nice and slow on your knee. Make sure your knee's not going past your toe. This is a good general fitness item. Be very careful doing lunges. Don't go deeper than you need. Don't do more than you're used to. If you want more information on the proper lunge form, there are a lot of great videos on that. Go ahead and look up a traditional lunge or a runner's lunge. I'm not the expert in that. I'm sure mine need just a little time in front of the mirror to review myself. But that is one that we like, and it's really good for helping build up some knee strength. Just be careful not to overdo it. That is the club lunge. This next one is called a knee lift. So what you're going to do is one club is going to go up to an extension or forward 45. The other one is going to go back opposite, right? Whichever club is pointing back, lift that knee and alternate, keeping your core as stable as possible, getting as much lift in the knee as possible. These are knee lifts. This last one I'm going to teach you today is called the side kick. So what you do, I'm going to tell you which leg to use. It's going to make this make more sense. Take your left leg, this is my left, take your left leg and you're going to kick it to the inside, right? Just a nice little inside kick. You're going to take your right club, you're going to swing it in front of your body, opposite the thing, right? Don't smack yourself in the knee, pay attention. Take your other club and swing it behind your body in the opposite direction. Here, and then you're going to do the other side. So it's on the front, you swing whichever club is going opposite your leg. So if I'm swinging my left leg in front, I swing my right club in front. If I swing my right leg in front, I swing my left my left club in front. Boink, boink. Paying close attention not to mess that. Now you can start to get some hip action in here and a little side-by-side movement. Make myself a little extra room here. This will help some flexibility for sure, as will the knee lifts. These are the side kicks. Hey, thanks for following along in this video. It's helped teach you some patterns. I'm sure you're gonna have questions. I'm sure you're gonna be like, hey, am I doing this right? If it's for one or two things, shoot me a message. Be like, here's a video of me doing a thing. What's not working? What am I doing wrong? We can also get on a Facebook call or something and each grab a set of Indian clubs and try to figure it out together, right? We are here for you. Stay sane in this COVID-19 world. And I'm gonna try to dole out some good videos on Indian clubs for you to use for at-home workouts.